Welcome to Business Success Tips, where you learn to make more money in less time and have a lot more fun. I'm your host, Paul Sanneman. I'm the founder of Contractor Staffing Source, where we help contractors build great teams. I have as my guest today, Dan Antonelli from Kickcharge Creative. That's an interesting name. I like that name. So Dan, tell me about how the company got started. You're the founder, you're the guy, or you're him, as my son would say. So tell me your background a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. This is actually our 29th year in business. I started it when I was 27 years old. Originally started basically with roots in the sign industry, where I basically was working with the trades very early on in my life. So actually at age 15, I was hand lettering my first contractor's van in my parents' backyard. So I really loved lettering. I loved working with contractors, and I love seeing my work out in the sort of the real world. It was, pretty cool to see a van drive by that you had done the lettering on.
Mhm.
And then I actually wound up going to college and got a degree in advertising and worked for a little while after graduating as a graphic designer and started the business sort of on the side. And I just thought it would be a really cool thing if a home service contractor or a contractor in general could go to a single source and get most of their marketing from that single source, so that it was everything looked the same, it looked similar, whether it was a website or a brochure or a truck or a business card. And the logo became really the most critical piece of that foundation. So we, at this point now, I think we have 38 employees here, or 37 employees, and we'll do the branding for approximately 300 home service companies this year, I would say roughly. We
Mhm.
do a lot of naming as well, so we'll rename companies or startups we'll do the naming for. And that sort of mindset of just making sure everything looks on brand, everything looks professional, and how that affects their marketing spend in general is really kind of the foundation of what we believe in here.
Okay, so branding, I've been in this business for God knows 40 years, an old guy. And somehow branding has never really made it, in my opinion, to the construction industry very effectively. I mean,
Hmm.
you look at retail, if you're gonna have a new Levi's, any kind of product, branding is like everything, right? But somehow in construction, it never really seemed that, but especially small contractors, it's like, it's a name, right? So maybe you can help to explain the audience, because most of the people listening to this between 5 and 30 employees, or between 1 million and pick a number, 20 million. They're not like big companies.
Hmm.
Um, why is branding so important to a small company like that, and what kind of difference can it make?
Sure. I mean, it's a great question. And it's interesting to, it's funny. I just posted something on Facebook on my page about a home improvement company that we just did the branding for. And we also did their naming for. But what I love about that particular space and that vertical in particular is that you don't see a lot of um, construction companies investing in their branding. And so when you do something really disruptive for a company, they tend to really do very well because most of their competitors have very little understanding of why it's important to invest in their branding. But what we tend to see is, first of all, the people who aren't investing in their branding, if they're attempting to scale, if they're attempting to grow, you tend to see them spending a significant amount more on their leads, right? So they're paying Google to deliver their name in front of people instead of maximizing the opportunity of actually being visible right in their own community. So the
Right.
idea of what we do is we build brands that are meant to be sticky. So we like to say, our brands essentially live rent free in the consumer's mind. So when they are actually ready for service, they remember your brand, they remember your brand name instead of saying, contractors near me or roofing company
Right. I
near
mean,
me.
can we think about it? Most people name a good restaurant. They'll have a name. It's if they think of Target, they think of Walmart, they think of Home Depot. The brands in their head tend to be those kinds of things. And in fact, you can say, give me the name of a good contractor. John, Frank, John, I forgot the guy's name, right? And it just doesn't occupy a
Yep,
space in
exactly.
people's brains.
Yeah.
And I guess, how important is it that, and how do you make it happen? Is it expensive? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's also just in terms of cost, very few people go through the process of rebranding, at least with us, and at the end say, "Oh my God, that was so much money, and I'm really, it wasn't a great investment." It's always like, "Oh my God, I wish we had done this sooner," because not
Right.
only does it affect your marketing spend, it affects your ability to close business. It affects your ability to increase your average tickets. It affects your ability to recruit the right people. So there's so many other aspects of it beyond just having a pretty awesome brand, a pretty awesome truck wrap and sight signs and uniforms. There's this whole other thing that happens that really helps accelerate the growth of the companies that embrace the power of it. And like I said, it reminds me kind of how, um, even the HVAC sector probably hasn't. It's only been the last 5 years that they've really truly embraced the power of a brand. So it kind of
Right.
reminds me of what it was like, almost 5 to 7 years ago for the HVAC space, where very few companies were investing in branding in the HVAC space. But now, if you're not investing in branding, you're really falling
I mean,
behind.
you can think of like a plumber, Roto-Rooter, right? That's a
Mhm.
franchise.
Yes.
But in a lot of franchises, one of the things they're selling is their brand. The reason you're going to pay 100,000 a franchise because they have a
Sure.
brand, right? But
100%. Yep.
people think, well, I mean, I'm John Doe plumber, or I'm ABC, remodeler or HVAC guy. Brand doesn't even come up for these guys.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? It's not in the DNA, or why didn't even think
I
about it?
mean, there is actually so much either wrong information about branding for home service companies or just a lack of information. So, I wrote a book last September called Branded Not Blanded, and it's specific to the home service industry. And honestly, the part of the reason why I wrote it was I was hoping it would get in the hands of a lot of people even before they start the journey, because it's going to help them avoid making some of the most common fundamental errors from day one. And one of the biggest errors that most companies make, or owners make, entrepreneurs make, is that they name their company wrong. So they name it after themselves. They
Right.
name it using initials or their last names or the initials of their kids. I mean, these are all basically huge problems that you're going to spend a lifetime working to
Oh,
overcome.
I've got a perfect example. One of my clients, I can't his name, but let's call him John Doe Homes, right? He named the name after it's called John Doe Homes. He built this company to like 100 million. He says the biggest mistake he ever made because he can't get away from it. I mean, he sold it on company, they're still calling him, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he's got his name on the thing and he can't ever leave it. And
Right.
now that it's this big company, he's destined for life. People will track him down and say, my plumbing leaks and it's your fault.
And the other challenge with it is also there's no promise inferred with it. So, if it was Antonelli's construction, well, how do you know Antonelli's construction is any good? Like, you
Right.
don't. It may take years and years and years of maybe people in the community using you, maybe to build your own reputation. But if you start with a name that already has an inferred promise, then you already have an expectation. So, the other thing too is everything that we're trying to do is essentially control what Mrs. Jones thinks about the experience that she might get if she hired you. So if I can control that expectation, then when you ring the doorbell, you have a much higher chance and a much higher likelihood of closing the sale, getting the right dollars for it, because she believes that there's a reason why there's a premium to be paid using your services versus someone else's. So there's so much psychology. I mean, in my book, there's a whole chapter on consumer psychology as it relates to branding for home service companies. And, that's the other piece that people don't understand is that if I can not only live in someone's head, but I can also help establish what the expectation is of service before I even get to deliver it, then it's a much higher likelihood, again, that you'll have, better booking rates, better close rates, higher average tickets, all those things that go along
And
with it.
what's funny is we're a branded nation, right? I mean, I have a house in one of our house in Palm Springs. It has one of the biggest, malls. What do you call it? Like what
Mhm.
it, those, malls that are not actually they're like wholesale malls, but they're all brand names, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So where everybody like, and it's nothing but 150 stores of brand names. and people go by whether it's Levi's or, pick one. This country's based on trusting a brand.
Yeah.
And people purchase based on brands, which is crazy, right? And
Oh,
even if
absolutely.
it's like, Kirkland, which is whatever, that's a Costco's brand, right? It's still a brand.
Yeah.
And so it's funny how a nation based on branding for purchases, which is, I think, where a lot of people, they have a trusted name. They buy the stuff because the name means something, right?
Right.
And that hasn't actually made it to construction. And um, I guess it's just because it's never showed up. I'm curious why it hasn't got there yet.
I mean, sometimes people actually aren't interested in scaling their business or growing their business. They're, really happy staying a 1 or 2 or 3 van operation, and they're not really necessarily interested in going to that next level. I mean, that's certainly part of it. I think also, like I said, is just a lot of misinformation and a lot of misunderstanding about how it functions and how it affects so much of their business. So, you know, the people, the one entity that loves really, really weak brands is Google. They make a ton of money off of people with weak brands because you have to pay to put your name in front of the right people. And our approach is I would rather our clients be 5 mile famous and everyone within 5 miles understand what you do. And so when they are ready for service, again, they are just Googling your brand name, which
Mhm.
Google is going to deliver that result at a minimal cost versus you paying for LSA or PPC to deliver the same result. So, it's all in, part of what you want to do, what you want to personify and where you want to go. But a lot of the people we do work for, they actually perform a great service when they get inside the home. You just can't tell by looking at them.
But I guess it's branding is I see, AI, you just don't do diversity here. AI is causing a disruption in this industry because a lot of money is coming into it, which, because AI is not going to do your plumbing, but it can do your law and your medical law, anything where people are selling information and actually doing something.
Mhm.
And so you see a lot of capital coming in. And my concern is, I think there used to be maybe 20 roofing companies or 30 roofing companies in a town. There's going to be three, and three that everybody recognizes. So like
Yeah.
the Walmart syndrome, right? Like,
Mhm.
a lot of small retail in town, and then all of a sudden they build a Walmart and a Target and they suck all the money out of downtown because they understand how to run a business.
Yeah.
My concern is this is going to happen to the service industry in the same way.
And to your point, there is so much consolidation in home services. I mean, you know how much private equity money is flowing into home services, particularly in the
Right.
HVAC space, but roofing is
Right.
also starting to see that as well. So then what are you doing to position yourself to combat that, right? Are you investing in things that will help? Because they're going to outspend you very easily. They're gonna basically be spending a lot of money on LSA and PPC, and they're going to be doing everything they can to make sure that their ad is showing up ahead of yours. But there's no way they can beat you on branded keyword searches. And that's the beauty, again, of being disruptive within your own community. And the interesting thing about a lot of the PE money is they don't have a healthy appetite for rebranding, generally speaking. They're very complacent in that particular regard. They have a very consistent return that they're getting, and they typically don't want to make significant changes related to branding. So that still remains to me the opportunity that you have as a smaller company to embrace how important that brand is, how to leverage a great brand, and to make sure, again, that you're working so hard to be top of mind for when that consumer needs it. Because you got to remember, too, people think truck wraps, as an example, are calls to action. Like, I'm gonna be driving my truck, and everyone that sees it, they're maybe ready to make a purchase decision. And honestly, it's like 5% of the people who actually are seeing an ad on your truck are actually in the market at that very second looking
Mhm.
for your particular service. So it's not really how that's meant to work, but what it is meant to do, and when it's done well, is again be top of mind for when you need service. So that, oh yeah, I saw that van on my neighbor's driveway, right? I saw that van at the Home Depot. I saw that van, right? So how do we do that? How do we make that disruption work for us so that, again, when they are actually ready, they know your name? The scary stat too, there's another study that was done that talks about the fact that over 80% of the home consumers who are making purchasing decisions to hire a contractor do not know the name of a contractor to use. So imagine that, right? Over 80% of them have no idea who you are. So how do we own that space in their head, right?
Well,
What
the
can
good news is nobody else owns it, so it'd be pretty easy to figure it out, right?
Yeah, yeah. So imagine that all this work you're trying to do, and they have no idea who you are, right?
Right. When
So
somebody
what
says, name 3 contractors toward me, I could name you 3 restaurants. I could
yeah,
probably name you a couple drugstores, but I am, or name me 3 Levi's you like to buy, name me, pick a number of hats you like. You can give me brands, but that place of people's mind is not occupied by anything at the moment, right?
right. Yeah. So, I want to say it's not rocket science, but there is a lot of science behind what we do when we build a brand for someone.
So tell me the science. So I'm a, I don't know, a plumbing contractor, right?
Hmm.
And I have a plumbing service business, and I'm in a town of, a couple 100,000. There's 20 or 30 plumbing contractor with plumbing service businesses in the same town. How do I go about becoming him or the guy, whatever? How does that work? What do I
So
need to do?
yeah, I mean, first you need to look at what your own branding does or doesn't do, right? So does the name work? Does the name
They
deliver
say
the promise?
John Doe plumber is probably not a good idea, right?
Yeah, probably not a good idea. So, based on certain criteria, we look at how many years you're in business, what the revenue is, how well your current brand is. But if none of those things are really working in your favor, then we would probably suggest you change the name of your company. So that might be step one. Step two is look at the market and look at what your biggest competitors are doing. What do their brands look like? What colors are they using? What do their trucks look like? Right? So I don't want to put another brand in the same market that looks similar to what my competitors are doing because that defeats obviously the whole point. So I want to own my
Right.
colors, I want to own my brand name, and I want to own the approach that we're using to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to be disruptive while still delivering a promise to that consumer in how I present my information. Because you can make your truck pink and purple, and everybody would say they
Oh,
see your truck.
but what is that other kinds of things? So you do truck wrap, do some signs. How other ways can you build a brand in a community?
So simple things. And this is the part that takes work that some contractors just don't want to do, right? So going to home shows, going to community events, going to the parades in your community, having your vehicle towing a trailer with, a float, like that kind of stuff, sponsoring the kids' softball teams. Like you've got, there's 15 kids
Having
on
a
the team.
soccer kid's name with your name on their t-shirts, right?
Exactly. Now again, you think any one of those parents is thinking about another plumber when they need service after you just sponsored the entire team? And it's not costly. Like honestly, you think about how much you're going to pay for each lead on LSA, you're going to pay 60, 70, $80, maybe more depending on your market. How much did it cost you to put your name on the kid's jersey? Like it's easy stuff, but it takes work, right? And it's also long game. It's not short game. So some guys like, well, I need leads right now. Okay. Well, then some of those things aren't going to generate leads right this second, but they will over time. So I understand you're still going to need to pay for leads, right? And great branding isn't going to solve that 100%. But what we're trying to do is make you less reliant on paid advertising, essentially.
Well, that's something that, a national brand is not going to put their name on the kids' soccer team, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So that stuff it sounds like really good investment to me as far as ROI, even though it's a long-term ROI. Because if you become the guy in the market for plumbing or whatever, and everybody sees your name, the kids have their soccer, they see your float, you're towing the float, you're part of the local organization, you got signs around, they're going to recognize who you are. So when they need your service, they're actually going to know the name of a plumber at least, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that all goes along with that concept of just being 5 mile famous. So even like one other thing we didn't say is just even just site signs as you are working on the home, leaving the site sign up for a week after you do service. Now everybody in that neighborhood knows that you used that particular company. But again, it's not enough just to put a white site sign out there or have a van that's white that blends in, because that's the whole other issue, right? So it's more than just that, because you have to be disruptive. You think about most communities still have a ton of white vans. Why all of a sudden would your white van be memorable to that
Right.
homeowner? It's not going to be. We call that white van syndrome. It's like when, your brand blends in with everybody else's. So you need, in order to cure that, you need to sort of invest in obviously doing something that's much more unique, much more disruptive. If you can't, if there's no reason for Mrs. Jones to take a second look at your brand and have it resonate with her, then you're missing the mark. You're missing the opportunity.
So it seems to me contractors have a huge opportunity here because nobody else is doing it. I mean, it sounds weird. I just bought fiber optic cable for and the guy literally knocked on my door. Picture that. That's the highest, fiber optic, sort of the coolest new technology, right? And yet, only reason I did it because a guy knocked on my door and said, "Hey, did you know we have fiber optic cable?" I would never thought about changing from Spectrum to whoever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because, but he literally knocked on my door. That's old tactics, right?
100%. Yeah, I mean, that's just grassroots, door to door. So even doing simple things like putting door hangers on all the
Right,
neighbors' houses that you're working near. Hey, we're
right.
working on your neighbor's house. Do you need any of this service? Yeah.
And to
And because
me,
the neighbor used them, that also helps pre-qualify them also. Well,
right.
Betty, you just used them, and she must have done a lot of research, and I'm sure she was happy with them, or maybe I'll ask if she was happy with them. And if she was, then I'm already pre-qualified. I already feel like that contractor is pre-qualified.
So actually, branding could be the highest ROI, return on investment, to compete in a local market because other people aren't doing it, right? It's like a huge opportunity.
That's what we love about it. I love when we do a competitive analysis of the market and they say, Dan, here's the top, 5 to 8 companies that we compete against on a regular basis. And then I look at their brands and I sort of laugh to myself and I'm just like, awesome. Like, I love this because they're all doing a really bad job of branding their companies. And we have a great opportunity to do something really unique, really disruptive,
Right?
and
Because
catch,
the thing
sort of
is,
catch them
I
while they're
think
sleeping.
think about brand, like your truck is going to stay wrapped for a long time. Whereas when you pay for a Google ad, you get it and it's gone. And I think with a lot of venture capital coming into this industry, the price of ads is going to keep going up because they got a bunch of cash.
Oh yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
instead
I
of
mean, it's
being
already happening.
$50 a lead, in 2 years, it could be like $250 a lead
Yeah,
because they're just spending money to do it. Whereas
it's
if you have your trucks and you become the guy in that neighborhood, that's what people are going to think of when they want plumbing or whatever. They're not going to, they're not going to just go to go, oh, I know a plumber. My God, you've seen his vans everywhere. He's like the plumber for ABC town,
yep.
right? And that's long term. It'll last. It doesn't go away once people click and they're done, right?
Yeah. I mean, the ROI too, you have to remember too, it's, you sort of have the one-time investment of the branding, but if you've got a truck wrap, that's a 5-year life expectancy. Think about
Right.
how many impressions that vehicle will make over the course of five
And they're,
years.
they're
And you,
pressing the
yeah,
right people because they're not paying for stuff that's in the middle of nowhere. It's like right in your neighborhood, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But you go try and buy a billboard in your community and see how much that's going to cost on a monthly basis and compare the two. And it's absurd
I
how
know.
cost effective
Billboards
it
can
is
be
to
like
do it.
3,000 a month and you can rack the whole truck for that. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So to give you an example too, like one of our other clients in Jacksonville, Florida last year that we did the branding for, HVAC company, he had over 1,500 branded keyword searches in the month of July. Okay, that's people who literally typed in his name directly into Google to
Wow.
call them and book a job. So think about how much you would have had to pay for those same leads through LSA or PPC. But he doesn't need
Crazy.
to do that because he's become a household name in that community, just as you said.
That's great. Well, I think this is, really disruptive. And if you are a contractor or any kind of people, and my guess is your brand probably sucks. Chances are. I mean, just because you're not good at
Very
it.
high likelihood.
High likelihood. And nobody remembers your name. So if you want to become the guy or him, as my son would say, in your market, I think, that Dan can show you how to do it. And it's probably the best use of marketing dollars you're ever going to spend. So if you don't have a brand that everybody in town knows, I would suggest you give Dan a call because he can probably make it happen. And Dan, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure, you can just reach out to us at kickcharge.com. And I would say too, even if you never work with us, definitely check out my book on Amazon. It's called Branded, Not Blanded, and it's specific for home service contractors. And if you're working with another company, another design agency, it'll just give you a ton of tips on how to do it. You know, it'll cause you really to definitely rethink your own brand and give you a lot of insights on how to build a better brand for yourself.
Okay, that's a great idea. Dan, I really appreciate being here. I hope people take this advice because it make a huge difference in their business.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Paul.
Thanks, Dan.